good to go. How's Miss Karen doing today?
Everything's going good. My two sisters in Houston, they don't have to leave the home. I was one
That is great to hear, Karen.
The youngest one, boy, he's just tall, long and
I
green.
know he is. He's outgrowing me. Hi.
Hello, Maxine.
Okay, I'll go back here to this.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh.
You just lay those there, they'll be fine.
There we go.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Oh.
How's Karen?
I am doing really good, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and my sisters are not having to leave their
Oh,
homes
that's wonderful.
right now. I mean, I don't think...
So far,
I
anyway.
don't think they're going to have to, either one of them, but, you know, I know, yeah, right. Right now,
if they get
the water, as long as the
more
waters don't, you know, rise so much, but at least the rain's over with for them.
for now.
Yeah,
Oh, good,
for them
good.
in the part they're in. Anyway, there's,
Well, that sounds great.
yeah, I know there's so many people. I'm wondering about Curtis and Cheryl, their daughters. like in Spring, Texas. And
Oh, yeah,
and
that's
I
what it was
did
hit hard.
see some of that had the flooding. So I'm really, really wondering about that down
Yeah.
I don't know, I think they'll be here tonight, but thinking that they might have to go down and help
Yeah,
them a
help 'em
lot.
out.
And of course, Vera is here, so that would not be a good situation.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'll have to see it.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's a mess down there.
Oh,
I get discouraged
terrible.
because I just started to turn it off because it just makes me so sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't do anything.
I
You know.
I saw something this morning that I don't want to tell you what it was, but
Yeah.
no way they were bringing people out of the neighborhood and whatever happened to wait for
Yeah.
another. Anyway.
And then they won't have anything left when they get back.
No.
most of them.
Oh no. They won't.
So it's a sad situation.
The worst.
How's Mr. Dale tonight?
Well, he's here.
That's all you can say?
No, I could say a lot of things. But I'd have to ask for permission from my wife first.
Oh, it hadn't been a good day.
Oh, yeah.
We're getting that or a good week or something.
No, it's been a good day. Let's see,
You don't
what did
feel
I-
Good, I can tell.
What did I do today? I didn't do much this morning, except watch Price is Right. And then I took a shower and got dressed and everything. Came up here and spent a couple of hours up here working. And then I went and I bought 6 slabs of baby back ribs and 9 pounds of trim brisket. And I was going to buy some hamburger and ground pork, but it expired tomorrow, and I wasn't going to buy it with the expiration tomorrow. I'm getting ready to do a bunch of smoking on my Traeger.
Oh, you're just gonna put it in the freezer after you do that, or?
Yeah, I put it in food saver bags, but I'll bring some to the potluck next Sunday. So, not this
Next
Sunday,
Sunday,
not this
yeah.
Sunday, but the next
Oh,
Sunday.
Okay.
I haven't decided whether, because I'm going to make 4 meatloafs and 9 pounds of brisket and 6 baby back ribs.
Your dad.
Well, it's on the Traeger, so I don't have to do much. I just have to prepare the coating I put on it.
It's on the what?
On Traeger smoker. It's a smoker that uses pellets. So you
I've
put,
seen 'em.
yeah, you put it in there and you forget about it. That's the nice thing
Why
about
do
it.
you forget it? It doesn't burn anything.
No, because it has a thermostat on there. You set the temperature and everything.
Does it notify
And-
you on your phone?
Huh?
Oh, really?
Oh, got it.
What?
Does it notify you on your phone when
Is
it's
it a
done?
smart
No.
smoker?
No.
So it's not that smart, huh?
It's smart enough.
I had a customer.
But it's got an auger. It's got an auger that runs the pellets through based on the temperature that you set on it. And of course, I'll be smoking the ribs and the brisket, so it just puts enough pellets in there to provide smoke, and gets it up to I think 180 or 200 degrees.
No.
The brisket you have to cook for about 10 to 12 hours, though.
Sounds interesting. You say, when we get your trash on?
Same thing.
A week from Sunday
All right.
at potluck. I haven't decided what I'll bring yet. Whether I bring some ribs, or whether I'll bring some brisket, or whether I'll bring some of both,
Hey, there you go.
or whether I'll bring meatloaf.
Yep.
See, I cook the meatloafs in the Traeger as well. Yeah, yeah. Oh, it makes delicious meatloaf.
It is black.
You use applewood and cook that. Oh, it's good.
Smoked meatloaf.
Yeah. Well, it's not really. I mean, it's got a little smoke flavor to it, but you're cooking at a high enough temperature, you don't get a lot of smoke.
She's got the same kind of.
Hello, Pat. Hi, Debbie.
You can only get travelers at Chico's.
Let's see.
Or maybe I'm not sure about this. You don't know?
No, I'm looking at.
Yep, messed it up.
From here, you can't tell. But when you put it up against it,
26, 24, is that what you got?
That is not what I got. Yeah.
That's what I got. I don't know if it's right or not. But
That's terrible.
How you doing? How doing?
Hi, John.
All right, who called this meeting? Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah. Genesis.
you just think you're
Ladies, how you doing?
Hey, good fun, sir. Yes.
Okay.
so many little bottles of
Huh?
It even changes.
Good.
There.
We're in Genesis 27th chapter, beginning at verse 11. Billy,
Yes.
I had that stuff on that fish oil that I was going to bring to you tonight.
Yeah.
I left it laying there on the stairwell.
Of course. That's what we all do.
I know. But it's there on the stairwell. I'm making progress.
We won't be here soon.
Yeah. We'll be out of town.
You will?
Email me the info. Thanks for giving me the stuff.
Yeah. But if you want to look it up, it's Viva. V-I-V-A.
Okay.
Fish oil.
Las Vegas?
Huh? Yeah. V-I-V-A. Viva.
We'll remember it.
2,200 milligrams of fish oil.
So that's good. About right here.
Ah, my wife doesn't like fish.
Yeah.
it's ridiculous.
It is. Well, it is warm in here, but I think if we'll shut the door, it'll.
That's good.
That should bring some air in here. All right, Genesis 27th chapter, beginning at verse 11. Of course, we're talking about the stolen blessing, obviously, and Rebekah and Jacob's deception, if you will. We'll talk about that a little bit tonight, and of course Isaac and Esau. Isaac's health is not good at this point. There's some suggestion that maybe Isaac is pretty unhealthy, I'll say it that way. When you think about the fact that Esau was a hairy man, had lots of hair on his arms, but Rebekah was able to take the hair of a goat and deceive Isaac.
He must have really been hairy.
There's a lot of difference between the hair on a goat and the hair on the arm, though. And
For some people.
Blind and
yeah, so anyway, yeah, he was blind, and so obviously he couldn't see, but we'll talk about a few of those things. Huh?
He was old also.
Yes, he was old. Donna is not well, that's why she's not here tonight. Got an email message from Marcia. She had her last chemotherapy last Monday.
Good.
And she'll have to stay down there until probably around the middle of October. Doctors want to keep her down there to check her and make sure there's no side effects unexpected from the chemotherapy, and then she'll be able to come home.
Good.
So that's a good thing, good progress. Lots of members of the church in Houston, obviously in bad shape and everything, so we want to continue to remember them in our prayers
Are we
as
going
well.
can we send any kind of support to some of those congregations down there that need it?
We haven't been asked for any support, but I mean that's something we'll always look at and everything. As a congregation, we won't send support to a congregation, but you know.
Well, I just wondered if we had asked any of the, like we've had some gentlemen come over here to preach from the Houston area.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
do
but
they
we've
need help? Do their members need help? So we can do it. I think we're willing.
we've heard nothing from them at this point, so we'll wait and see because it's not over yet. In fact, it'll probably be worse before it's better. So keep them in our prayers. On your handout, it's on page 66, and you're on capital letter G. We'll be looking at capital letter G, and then we'll get into capital letter H, part of that. So, Cal, would you want to lead us in a prayer this evening?
Our gracious Lord, Father, we give you thanks for this day of joy, and for all the rich blessings that you've given us. Those blessings both physical and spiritual. We give you all glory and honor and praise for the great things you've done. We're mindful tonight as we meet those in Texas that are suffering from flooding, from damages to their home. They're at risk sometimes for life and death. They have lost their property. As you be compassionate, have mercy on those that are working to rescue them, to help them. And let us be of liberal hearts, willing also to share and to help them recover from their misery. Mindful of those that are not here tonight because of illness, sickness of the spirit. Say blessings upon them. And pray for intercession on their behalf. Be restored. And if they're not, then give them comfort and protect them. We're thankful for the opportunity we have to come together tonight to study your word, to sing songs of praises, to learn more from your word. And as we study the Old Testament, let us look at the lessons that are presented there. There are lessons needful for us to learn, that we may more readily understand what is taught in the New Testament, as to continue always to protect us and use us in your service. Bless us in that great day when you gather all of yours together. May we all be gathered without the loss of love is our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, in Genesis 27, just going back to verse 5 real quick. Remember, this is Rebekah's listening to what Isaac is saying to Esau. Isaac's saying to Esau, I want you to go out, I want you to hunt, and I want you to bring the game back and prepare a meal for me. And so then we get down to verse 8, or verse 9 rather. And Rebekah's telling Jacob to go out into the flock, bring 2 choice kids of the goats, and then she'll prepare this game for her husband, and she's given instructions to Jacob as to what he's to do and everything. So that brings us down to verse 11 through 13. And so, Karen, if we could begin with you tonight, would you read verses 11 through 13 for me, please?
Okay. And Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. My father peradventure will feel me, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me and not a blessing. And his mother said unto him, Upon me be thy curse, my son. Only obey my voice and go fetch me then.
Okay. So as you see up here, the heading I have here, deception of others can come with a high price tag if the deception is found out. And that's the case here. Jacob's concern lay not with the lie, but with being caught. And if it backfires by Isaac's discovery of the ploy, Jacob will subject himself to the worst of all fates, and that is his father's curse. This could be the case for anyone who misleads the blind, and we'll look at some scriptures here. First, look at Leviticus, the 19th chapter, and verse 14. Cal, if you had that, if you'd read that for me, please.
Leviticus 19:14?
Yeah, Leviticus 19:14, and then Billy, if you'd read Deuteronomy chapter 27, verses 18 and 19 for me.
Okay, Leviticus 19:14. You shall not curse a deaf man, nor place a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall revere your God. I am the Lord.
And so again, talking about the blind here. And then Deuteronomy 27 verses 18 and 19.
Cursed is the one who makes the blind to wander off the road. And all the people shall say, Amen. Cursed is the one who perverts the justice, to the stranger, the fatherless, and widow. And all the people shall say, Amen.
Okay, and so the same thing can be true if one dishonors his or her parents. Looking at Exodus, the 21st chapter, verses 15 through 17. Florence. Yes.
And he who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. He who kidnaps a man and sells him, or if he is found in his hand, shall surely be put to death. And he who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death.
And then we look at Deuteronomy, the 21st chapter, verses 18 and 19. Maxine?
Genesis next.
Genesis 23.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Deuteronomy 21, verses 18 and 19.
Oh, you don't have it up there. You don't have it up there.
I don't?
He's got it before.
Oh, okay. Well, do you have it?
Just a minute.
Deuteronomy 21? I did leave it off, didn't I? I guess so.
27, 18.
No, Deuteronomy 21, verses 18 and 19.
If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father, or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him, will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him, and bring him out unto the elders of the city, and unto the gate of his place.
Okay, and we'll not read Deuteronomy 27, verse 16, because it basically says the same thing. If one misleads the blind or dishonors his or her parents, then one would be subject themselves to the worst of all fates. We are not told how Isaac reacts to Rebekah after this incident. I can only imagine how he might react. There are some hints that are given because she ominously disappears after this scene. The writer memorializes Deborah, her nurse, rather than Rebekah. Look at Genesis, the 35th chapter. And again, I don't have that up there, but Genesis 35. And we'll look at verse 8. Genesis 35, verse 8 says, Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried below Bethel, under the terebinth tree, so the name of it was called Allon Bachuth. Now, it makes no notice of her death that we read about back in Genesis 23rd chapter, and Debbie, if you have that, read Genesis 23 verses 1 and 2 for me.
Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her.
That's not the verse I wanted, obviously. That's dealing with Sarah, not with Rebekah. However, if you go to Genesis 49, verse 31, at the end of Genesis, even though nothing's said about Rebekah up to this point, the writer notes that she was given an honorable burial with the other patriarchs and matriarchs in the cave of Machpelah. Look at Genesis 49 and verse 31. Pat, you had that?
There they buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah, his wife. And there I buried Leah.
Okay. So we know there were 5 people buried there, and Isaac and Rebekah were buried there. Any comments through verse 13? All right, look at verses 14 through 17. John, you want to read that for me, please? And in your handout, this will be capital letter H.
And he went and fetched his, and brought them to his mother, and his mother made savory meat such as his father loved. And Rebekah took goodly raiment of her eldest son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them upon Jacob, her younger son. And she put the skin of the gut kids of the goats upon his hands and upon the smooth of his neck. And she gave the savory meat and bread which she had prepared unto the hand of her son Jacob.
All right, so as I have up there are times when individuals go to great lengths in order to deceive others, and this is exactly what Rebekah is doing here. After 90 years of marriage between Rebekah and Isaac, it would be an easy task to prepare food such as the father loved. You would hope. Caleb doesn't think so.
I said I would have deceived him sooner.
Some
deceived me sooner.
There are some, though, that have suggested that there may be a touch of irony intended in these verses here. Because when you think about it, had Rebekah long been stung by her husband's preference for Esau's cooking? You see, he told Esau to go out, kill this wild animal, bring it back in, and cook it for me. He didn't ask Rebekah to cook it.
She was probably making him eat green stuff, and so good for him and healthy stuff.
Right.
I know exactly how he feels.
You know how he feels, okay.
Poor thing.
So,
Trying to keep you around.
Just so she can torture me more.
So here's the thing. Esau was an outdoorsman. Jacob was not. There would be a unique scent to each of them then, wouldn't there?
Yep.
So wearing Esau's clothes would cover the sense of smell. And this is tested apparently when Isaac asked his son to kiss him, looking at verses 26 and 27. Look at that real quick and then I'll get you here, John. Verses 26 and 27 says, Then his father Isaac said to him, Come near now and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing and blessed him and said, Surely the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. So he was blind, but he certainly knew the smell of his son. And so Rebekah was very cunning in this, having Jacob put on Esau's clothing. Yes, John?
Wasn't Jacob a shepherd?
Yes.
Kind of hard not to shepherd out in the field.
Well, that's true. That's true. The extent of Rebekah's cunning, though, is fully revealed. She has anticipated the possibility that Isaac would try to smell Jacob. And it is Esau's smell that he will detect in Esau's clothing. So the last sense of touch is the biggest concern here. Rebekah must believe that her husband is extremely incapacitated at this point, for he will not be able, she thinks, to distinguish between human hair and goat skin. But if you've ever been around a goat, there is a big difference between the hair on a goat and the hair on a man. I don't care how hairy the man is on his arms. There is a difference. Yes,
Little
yeah.
kids, if she gets young kids, their hair is a little different. It's
It
not
is.
as thick. It's not as wiry yet. Everything else.
Yeah. And this is what she had instructed Jacob to bring in, was 2 kids. So, yes, John.
It already said Isaac had detected the difference in the voice.
Yes, and we'll get to that. So
he was already suspicious, but it was good enough to get by his suspicions.
yeah. So let's read verses 18 through 20, Stephanie.
So he went to his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am. Who are you, my son? Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done just as you told me. Please arise, sit, and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. But Isaac said to his son, How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? And he said, Because the Lord your God brought it to me. Isaac said to Jacob, Please come here. How far am I reading?
Just to 20.
Oh, sorry.
But if you want to read 21, that's...
All right. Isaac said to Jacob, Please come near, that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not.
I didn't really mean it.
You're not supposed to say things you don't mean.
I guess. All right. So Jacob comes in and he says, "My father." Now, you would think that because Rebekah and Jacob is in the process of deceiving Isaac, that he's going to do his best possible imitation of Esau's voice. But it's a known fact when a person loses one sense of the five senses, the other senses become stronger. And here Isaac is blind, and so his hearing is very acute, his smell is very accurate, very strong, and his sense of touch. So, although Jacob had tried to sound like his brother, he was unable to fully deceive his father. There was enough of a difference combined with the quick return for Isaac to question the speaker's identity. Jacob nearly gives himself away by talking too much or asserting his identity with Esau. After Isaac says, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau," now Jacob only speaks once. Look at verse 24 there. "Then he said, 'Are you really my son Esau?' Notice, all he said was, 'I am.' So in his answer, Jacob tells three clear lies. First, he claims to be Esau. Second, he claims to have carried out Isaac's orders. And thirdly, he claims that the goats from the flock are the game that he killed. So then Jacob told a real whopper when you think about it. He is subtly claiming divine confirmation of the impending blessing, tying the success of his hunt to the God of the patriarchal blessing. You remember he said God brought this game. This is why I was able to get it so quickly. So this bold lie is one of the most flagrant instances of the abuse of God's name recorded anywhere in the Scriptures. Any comments through verse 20?
I actually think that makes it the fourth lie.
Well, yeah, I did mislead you there a little bit. This was the fourth lie, yes. And this was the real whopper when he included God into the deception.
Well, I think Ananias and Sapphira got pretty close to it.
Yes. Yes, they did.
Is that profaning his name when you know you are lying? I'm just asking a question, I don't know.
Using God's name in profanity or in vain?
I guess in vain is
Yeah.
better to say. He knew he was lying.
He knew he was lying, yeah.
That's pretty frightening when you use God in it.
And one could suppose a lot of things, and you can look at the commentaries, and commentaries offer various thoughts and everything. One of the things to think about, though, is in this situation, Jacob knew Isaac was a very God-fearing, very faithful man. And so to mention the name God here would only solidify and prevent Isaac from asking further questions.
Like swearing to it.
Yeah, yeah. So,
bringing God into it.
yeah. Any other thoughts? Yes, Cal?
Well, when we read the Bible, people talk about how the characters in there were so bad, right? I said, well, they're human. I said, the Bible doesn't sugarcoat anything. What you see is what you get.
Right.
And it just occurs to me that Abraham's family, his own personal family, and that of his children, they had some serious problems in the families. I mean, there was, you take Jacob's kids, he's got 12 children by 4 different mothers, and there may have been more for all I know, but it caused all problems, and there was bickering and hatred and discontent and everything else in the family. But God doesn't sugarcoat that.
No.
He's telling you the story, and And so we get to take a look at all of it and consider all of it.
Absolutely.
He's not recommending what I read here as this is the way we're supposed to be in our families.
No.
He's just showing you a family, what's going on there. But what he's also showing you is how God's plan is going to work through, in spite of the different things that happen, God's plan continues on. And
God's plan continues on, but I truly believe that a lot of the reason why some of these examples are here, or stories, whatever you want to say, is for our understanding that God knows that we're not going to be perfect as we grow, and we're going to make mistakes. But you can go all the way up to David. And look what David did. And yet David was a man after God's own heart. And so we have examples here that lets us know that, okay, we can make a mistake, but we can repent of that mistake and make things right as well. You have a comment, John?
I was just going to say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all had problems with truth.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You tell them she's my sister, or you're my sister, things like this. Yeah. They all. But mankind, we all have some problems.
They also all had problems with patience and believing in God and waiting for God. They didn't wait on Him.
Right.
And that's what we have to do. We have to wait on God. His time is not our time.
Absolutely.
And in fact, He had said Jacob was going to get these blessings and everything else. But no, Rebecca had to hurry the process along. The same way that Sarah tried to say, well, I'll just figure out how this is going to happen. God can't seem to get it done. I can get it done. And every time they do that kind of thing, then it doesn't turn out well at all.
That's true. Ron, you want to...
Wouldn't have been any reason for Jesus to die on the cross if we weren't going to make mistakes occasionally. I mean, I think that.
That's true.
I'm going to use a stronger word, sin. Not just mistake, sin.
That's very true. All right. Ron, you want to read verses 21 through 24 for me, please?
Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near, that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went near to Isaac his father, and he felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." And he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. Then he said, "Are you really my son Esau?" He said, "I am."
So Isaac's concerns still were not alleviated then. So he calls on his sense of touch to solve the issue. Jacob's attempt to imitate Esau's voice obviously had not been successful because Isaac questioned that. So Jacob is often characterized as a wholly deceitful person. This instance, however, seems to prove that categorization is incorrect. This entire lie hinged on Jacob being essentially trustworthy. If Jacob had a long history of dishonesty, Isaac would have known at once that something was wrong and would not have been so easily fooled. So this would suggest that Jacob was indeed a very faithful individual as life went on here up to this point. So he was essentially trustworthy, and that's why he was able to deceive his father so successfully. Yes, Isaac?
Was he doing what his mother wanted in it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was doing what his mother wanted.
He could have been respecting what she wanted too, you know. I think that could have been a bigger motivator, I would think. Wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, doing what his mother wanted, but...
and she said, "It curse be on me, not you, if you get caught." And that's
right.
Right.
Yeah. Because he was a mama's boy, and Esau was the daddy's boy. Yes, Cal?
Well, it just shows how favoritism affects a family. And you see it all the way through.
Absolutely.
I suspect that with Abraham and Sarah, Abraham did not want to... He knew that Isaac was the one that would have the blessing, but he did not want to force out his other son.
Right.
Because of favoritism, he had to.
Right.
keep peace with his wife. Well, then we see favoritism there with Isaac and Rebekah, and then when Jacob is married, has children, he has favoritism going on there. So it just seems to go on down the line there. And when you have multiple wives and multiple children there, then competition within the family becomes very bitter sometimes.
Yeah. We do have to keep in mind that Esau was the firstborn. And so, you know, this could be part of Isaac's motivation as well, being Esau was the firstborn. He should have the blessing. But this was not God's plan. And God had planned for Jacob to get the blessing. And so God's plan is at work here. And whether Rebekah and Isaac or Jacob did these things or not, God's plan will succeed.
It's hard for us to even get that through our thick heads.
Yeah, yeah.
That was going to happen.
Exactly right. In your handout now, we're down to, let's see here. Actually, we're really about capital letter K on page 66 of your handout. But we're going to look at verses 26 and 27. Isaac, you want to read that for me, please?
Then his father Isaac said to him, Come near me now and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing and blessed him and said, Surely the smell of my son is like the smell of the field, which the Lord hath blessed.
All right, so once again, Isaac typifies Christ, although this time in being betrayed by a kiss. Now, what was the first time that he typified Christ?
What was the question?
Do what?
What was the question again?
What we see here in this request for the kiss, Isaac is typifying Christ by being betrayed with a kiss, okay? But what was the first time that he was...
When he was offered.
When he was offered, the sacrifice, okay? We'll not look at Matthew 26, verse 49, but let's look at 2 Samuel chapter 20, verses 8 through 10. Karen, you had that?
Oh, no.
We're back to you now.
Sorry.
That's okay. 2 Samuel chapter 20 and verses 8 through 10.
When they were at the great stone, which is in Gibeon, and Amasa came to meet them, and Joab was girded with his apparel of war that he had put on, and therefore was a girdle with a sword fastened upon his loins in the sheath thereof, and he went forth, and it fell out. And Joab said to Amasa, Is it well with thee, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him.
And so here again we see another example of a betrayal. In this case, his betrayal, Isaac's betrayal, with a kiss for personal gain was superseded in Scripture only by Judah's famous kiss of Jesus for silver. Okay? Any comments through verse 27? All right, Cal, would you read verses 28 and 29 for me, please?
Now may God give you of the dew of heaven, and of the fatness of the earth, and an abundance of grain and new wine. May people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be master of your brothers, and may your brothers' mothers' sons bow down to you. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you.
Okay. In your handout now, this is capital letter K. All right. So here we have the blessing given to Jacob. The first part of the blessing is concerned with the physical provisions. When you see that phrase, the dew of heaven, this would refer to the rain for crops. The fatness of the earth would refer to the abundance in harvest. The Hebrew for grain and wine are names of two local gods. Dagon is grain. This was a Philistine deity, and Tirosh was wine. and this was a Canaanite god. This may be to indicate to the Israelites who were about to take the land of Canaan that it was the God of Jacob who will provide Jacob with all the ingredients of fertility that were thought to be given by the Canaanite gods. Remember, they're surrounding all of these faithful children of God here was all of these pagan worshipers. And so they worshiped Dagon and they worshiped Tirosh, but now this is a blessing the God of Jacob, okay? From the physical, though, Isaac turns his focus to the political. In spite of God's pre-birth prophecy back in Genesis, the 25th chapter and verse 23, which we'll not go back there and read that, Isaac seeks to bless Esau with dominance over Jacob, seeking to annul and invalidate God's original verdict in reference to the relationship of these children. Well, let's go back and look at Genesis 25 and verse 23 and just read that for a moment. 25 and verse 23. It says, "And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 people shall be separated from your body. One shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger." Okay? But Isaac is trying to reverse that. He's trying to make the younger be servant to the older. And that is the purpose of the blessing. So Isaac seeks to bless Esau with the dominance over Jacob then. The latter part of verse 29 that Cal read ties the entire blessing back to the blessing given to Abraham. Let's go all the way back to Genesis chapter 12 and look at that blessing. Genesis chapter 12, and we're going to look at verses 2 and 3. God says to Abraham, He says, "I will make you a great nation, I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So, this was the blessing, and so this latter part of verse 9 ties this entire blessing back to this blessing that was given to Abraham. It is interesting that although Isaac gives to Esau the blessing of land and nation, at least he thinks he's giving it to Esau, I'll say, okay? He stops short of blessing him with the seed. Either he understands that it is God's will to give this blessing, or he knows that it is too sacred to be tampered with. Although Isaac was deceived, God was not. The blessing came to whom God chose. Jacob lied to get it, and Jacob would pay for his deceit. After he leaves, he never sees his mother again. He leaves a position of means and influence in this prominent family to a position of rigorous service for 20 years. What was that rigorous service?
For his wives.
For his wives.
And he's such herds and sheep.
Do what?
And the animals.
Yes.
6 years, wasn't it? For
Yes.
the animals?
Yes. So a total of 20 years. 7 years for each wife and 6 years for the animals. So also you need to recognize that his deceit is cruelly reversed here. In the sense that when Laban has his older daughter impersonate the younger, that we'll look at in chapter 29. And finally, Jacob, the deceiver of his father, was even more cruelly deceived by his sons.
What comes around goes around.
Exactly right. What goes around comes around. They sold Joseph into slavery and claimed that he was dead. And so, although he got the birthright, he did lose a great deal there. Any comments up through verse 29?
Seems God has a way of marking your memory when you make that kind of a mistake, because it comes right back to haunt you, and you think about it, and you think, oh, if only I'd have let God be in charge.
You know, it's that old saying that nothing is free. Nothing is free, and when you sin, you are going to pay the consequences. You look at every example in the Bible. Look at David. Did David not suffer consequences? He was not allowed to have that son, was he? You look at every situation. You look at Paul, the Apostle Paul. Did he not suffer because of the sins that he had committed?
Every day of his life.
Every day of his life. And he was reminded of all that. We will indeed suffer because of the sins we commit. But that does not mean that they will not be forgiven for us. There are things that we might lose, such as Jacob lost here. But in the same time, there may be things that we actually come out ahead. Because it was a great life learning experience for us that caused us to make some significant change in our life to make us a better person. Just a thought on that. All right, look at verses 31 through 43 here.
One other thought on that.
Yes, Cal.
A lot of people think, well, with forgiveness comes avoidance of consequence. That's not true. Sin always has consequences.
That's exactly right.
Now, the consequences could be physical death and spiritual death, or with repentance, the consequences might be physical death, but not spiritual death if one has repented.
Yeah.
But you might have to still suffer physical.
Very true. Okay, this is a fairly long reading. We're probably not going to get through it, but we'll try to at least get through the reading and maybe part of it. And let's see, Billy, I think it's your turn. Let me break it down a little bit.
What am I reading?
Genesis 27. Read verses 31 through 36 for me, and then Florence can read verses 37 through 43.
Okay. He also had made savory food and brought it to his father and said to his father, "Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me." And his father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" So he said, "I am your son, your firstborn Esau." Then Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, "Who? Where is the one who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate all of it before you came, and I have blessed him." And indeed he she-belled me. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read too fast, the bell rang.
That's all right. We're going to have to stop here anyway, Billy, so that was our last bell. I hate it. I knew that was probably going to happen, so we'll get that next week, because we definitely need to look at Esau.
I'm
And
supposed